What if a parasite could rewire your brain? Not to harm you, but to make you more romantic. This week on The Naked Scientist, we're exploring the bizarre world of Wolbachia, a bacterium that turns female fruit flies into mating machines. Researchers have shown that Wolbachia colonizes areas of the female fruit fly brain linked to decision-making and sensory perception, which boosts their desire to mate and, in turn, increases the spread of the bacterium itself. But this strange and fascinating behavior could actually hold the key to safer, smarter pest control. Wolbachia has already been used to help reduce the spread of mosquito-borne diseases like dengue and Zika. Now, by understanding exactly how it alters insect behavior, scientists hope to develop even more targeted alternatives to chemical pesticides. I've been speaking to lead author on the new study, Tim Carr from Arizona State University.
Infected females mate or are receptive to mating more so than uninfected females. And that phenotypic effect was what got us interested in trying to understand the molecular basis of this phenomenon.
Can you explain what exactly is going on in the brain and what role proteins play?
So a lot is known about genes that are involved in basic neural development, neural behavior, and developmental biology. So what we're able to show, and people have mapped out various areas of the brain that are involved in certain behavioral, like mating processes, feeding, foraging. We could demonstrate that Wolbachia populated those areas of the brain, suggesting that their presence in those areas of the brain were responsible somehow for these behavioral phenotypic effects that we were able to measure. We discovered these proteins using a proteomics approach. We identified over 150 proteins. Their relative abundances were significantly changed. We studied 3 of them that we knew had interesting basic biological effects on Drosophila. And for future studies, not only these 3, but perhaps the other 150 proteins that are still in need of scrutiny, we have something that we can focus on.
So if you're inducing that protein imbalance in these female flies and it causes these flies to mate more, that implies that Wolbachia could be doing the same. If we take this to be true, what could be the use in knowing this?
Pest control would be one of the major focuses, but also just understanding how bacteria can affect behavior in general in any animal.
You mentioned 150 proteins that were involved. Were all of these proteins involved in mating behavior?
No, as we sort of highlight in the paper, we looked at these proteins from the standpoint of just their changes in their relative abundances. We focused on the 3 that we thought were the most interesting. We were able to show that by altering the levels of those proteins in uninfected females could basically phenocopy the Wolbachia effect. The others have yet to be studied, and of course, we're going to continue to look at those.
Now that you've got a handle on this relationship, where do you go next? The other 150 proteins?
Well, yes, and also we should not forget that we were also able to identify over 700 Wolbachia proteins in the brain. And we were also able to quantify the relative levels of those proteins. We found some very interesting things also related to not just behavioral changes, but to perhaps, and again for future studies, aspects of the expression, the presence of the levels of certain Wolbachia proteins that one could argue could affect the symbiotic relationship. One has to ask, why would Wolbachia persist in the brain of an animal? This is an intracellular microbe that cannot live outside of the host. Why would an animal want to keep a bacteria like that inside the cell? And we discovered that there's relatively high levels of proteins that Wolbachia make that, for example, produce essential amino acids, something that, of course, all of we animals cannot produce ourselves. That's why they're called essential amino acids. And right there in those brain cells are pathways that are enhanced to produce those essential amino acids. One could start thinking about such biochemical process that a cell or an animal or a tissue could take advantage of.